I spent 3 days planning this anniversary dinner. 3 days. My husband's favorite meal, that stupid roast he always talks about that takes hours to make properly. His parents' favorite wine, the expensive one that costs more than our weekly groceries. And a dessert our daughter helped bake, her little hands covered in flour, so excited to surprise everyone. Everyone promised they'd come. Promised. You know what promises mean to family? Nothing. Absolutely nothing when it comes down to it. They didn't even text. I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes like some pathetic woman waiting for scraps of attention. 7:30 came and went. 7:45. The candles were burning down to nothing, wax pooling on my grandmother's tablecloth, the one I only bring out for special occasions because God forbid I use the good china for myself on a regular Tuesday. I looked at my husband across that beautiful table, surrounded by empty chairs that might as well have been tombstones, and I whispered, maybe they're running late. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew. I knew they weren't coming. Because deep down, I've always known where I stand with these people. Then I made the mistake of checking my phone. The family group chat, you know, the one where everyone pretends we're so close and loving, was lighting up with photos. Photos of them. All of them. Sitting around some fancy restaurant table, laughing, raising glasses, having the time of their lives. Without me. Without us. The caption read, "Family Dinner." Love these faces, with little heart emojis like they were mocking me. Like they were rubbing salt in a wound they didn't even care enough to acknowledge they'd created. I sat there staring at that screen until the blue light burned my eyes, watching my candles melt into nothing, listening to my daughter ask why nobody came to our party. What do you tell a child? How do you explain that the people who are supposed to love you most in this world can just forget you exist? Later that night, I washed every single untouched dish in that sink. The roast went into containers for leftovers nobody would eat. The wine went back in the cabinet. My daughter's dessert sat there looking as abandoned as I felt. The house was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the walls. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. And for one stupid, naive second, I thought maybe it was an apology. Maybe someone realized what they'd done. Maybe someone cared enough to explain. Sorry we missed dinner. You know how family gets busy. You can make it up to us by covering Grandma's cruise deposit, $2,000. I dropped that dish right back in the soapy water. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even hold a plate steady. $2,000. They couldn't spare 2 hours for my anniversary dinner, but they wanted $2,000 from my bank account. And that's when it all came flooding back. Every single time. Every single instance where I was their personal ATM machine while they treated me like an afterthought. My brother's rent when he couldn't make it this month, 6 months in a row. $800 each time because family helps family, and you're doing so well for yourself. My sister's wedding dress, the one she just had to have from that boutique downtown. $1,500 for a dress she wore once while I wore the same outfit to 3 different family functions because I couldn't afford anything new. My father's new phone because his old one was too slow, and everyone else has the latest model. $500 for a man who couldn't remember to call me on my birthday but somehow always remembered my bank account number when he needed something. The family vacation I paid for but couldn't attend because someone had to watch the house. The graduation party I funded but had to clean up alone. The Christmas presents I bought for everyone else's children while my daughter got homemade gifts because mommy's money went to everyone else's happiness. But when it's my turn, they vanish. The next morning, I made myself coffee and sat down with my phone, and I looked at those pictures again. Really looked at them. They were all there, my parents, my siblings, my aunt who only calls when she needs money, even my cousin who I haven't heard from in years except when tax season comes around and she needs someone to explain her paperwork. They were laughing. Laughing. having the time of their lives at some restaurant that probably cost more per person than I spend on groceries in a week. The caption under the photos read, "Family Forever," with a heart emoji, and I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Family forever. What a joke. Family when they need something, maybe. Family when the bill comes due, absolutely. But family when I need them? When I want to celebrate something important to me? When I just want to feel like I matter to the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally? Nowhere to be found. My husband found me crying over my coffee cup, scrolling through those pictures for the 100th time like I was torturing myself on purpose. He sat down next to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said the words I needed to hear but was too afraid to admit. You don't owe them anymore. But I couldn't let it go yet. I opened my budgeting app, the one where I track every penny because we're not rich like they all seem to think we are. I looked at the numbers. Grocery budget for the month, electricity bill due next week, my daughter's tuition payment for her piano lessons, the ones I almost canceled last month because money was tight. And there at the bottom, the number that made my stomach drop, $2,017.36. That's what was left in our checking account until my next paycheck. That's what stood between us and overdraft fees, between my daughter and her activities, between us and the financial security I'd been building penny by penny. They wanted almost every last cent of it for a cruise. A cruise. While I was eating ramen for lunch to save money, they wanted me to fund their vacation to the Caribbean. I whispered to my reflection in my phone screen, they want the last of it. And something inside me broke. Not in a sad way this time. In a liberating way. Like a chain snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. I opened my banking app. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. Determined. I created a new transfer, typed in my mother's account number, the one I knew by heart because I'd sent money there so many times before. In the amount field, I typed, $2. In the memo field, I wrote, Bon Voyage. And I pressed send. I pressed send. It wasn't much, but it was everything. $2. The cost of a candy bar. The cost of a cheap cup of coffee. But it was my line in the sand. It was me saying I'm done. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being your emergency contact for everything except emergencies that actually matter. I'm done funding your happiness while mine crumbles in the corner. That night, I locked our front door with more intention than I'd ever locked it before. I wasn't just locking out burglars or strangers. I was locking out years of guilt, years of manipulation, years of being told that love meant emptying my bank account every time someone else had a want they couldn't afford. We ate the leftover roast for dinner. My husband, my daughter, and me. The food was cold from the refrigerator, but for the first time in months, I felt warm inside. We talked about her school day. We planned a small weekend trip to the lake, something we could actually afford now that I wasn't funding everyone else's dreams. The food was cold, but freedom was warm. The storm hit the next morning. My phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. Text after text after text, each one more furious than the last. How dare you embarrass us like this? $2. Really? This is what we mean to you? You've changed since you got that promotion. Money has made you heartless. Dad's crying. Mom can't even look at your picture. How could you be so selfish? We're family. Family doesn't treat family like this. Heartless. Heartless. These people who couldn't spare 2 hours from my anniversary dinner were calling me heartless for not giving them $2,000. These people who forgot my birthday 3 years running were telling me I'd changed. These people who only called when they needed something were lecturing me about family values. I turned my phone off and went to work. But when I came home, they were there. All of them. Standing on my front porch like some kind of intervention squad. My parents looking stern and disappointed, my siblings with their arms crossed, even my aunt who I barely see except at funerals and fundraisers. They rang the doorbell. Knocked on the door. Rang it again. "We need to talk," my mother called through the door. "This behavior is unacceptable. Open this door right now." I looked through the peephole at these people, these blood relatives who were supposed to love me, and I saw strangers. Entitled, angry strangers who felt they had a right to my money, my time, my peace of mind, but not a responsibility to show up for my life. So I didn't open the door. They rang the doorbell again. And again. My daughter was getting scared. My husband was getting angry. And me? I was getting clear. Crystal clear about who these people really were. Then I heard my brother's voice. "If she won't talk to us, maybe the police will talk to her about family abandonment." Family abandonment. Family abandonment. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Almost. 20 minutes later, there were blue lights flashing outside my house. They actually called the police on me. For not giving them money. For setting a boundary. For saying no to people who had been saying no to me for years. The officer who came to the door was older, probably had grown children of his own. I showed him my phone, the screenshots of their demands, the bank statements showing years of transfers to various family members, the group chat photos of them having dinner without me the night before. He looked at everything carefully, then looked at me with something I hadn't seen from a family member in years, understanding. "Ma'am, you're not doing anything wrong. You're setting boundaries. That's not illegal. That's healthy." He walked back to my family, who were still standing on the sidewalk like they owned it, like they owned me. I watched through my window as he talked to them, and for the first time in my life, I saw their faces change when someone with authority told them they were wrong. My mother's righteous indignation cracked. My father's stern disappointment wavered. My siblings crossed arms uncrossed as they realized they couldn't bully me through a police officer. They left without another word. No apology. No acknowledgement. No moment of self-reflection about how their behavior had driven me to this point. Just anger that their usual tactics hadn't worked. The next day, my neighbor knocked on my door. Mrs. Henderson, the retired nurse who lives 2 houses down. She brought soup, real soup, homemade, the kind that takes hours to make properly. The kind you make for people you actually care about. "I saw all the commotion yesterday," she said gently, setting the pot on my kitchen counter. "I don't know what it was about, but I know you're good people. Sometimes the hardest lesson to learn is that family isn't who drains you. It's who feeds you." She gestured to the soup, smiled, and left. No demands. No expectations. No strings attached. Just kindness from someone who owed me nothing and gave me everything I needed in that moment. At work, my manager noticed I seemed lighter somehow. When I mentioned I might need some extra shifts to rebuild my savings, without explaining why my savings needed rebuilding, she offered me overtime hours and a small project bonus I hadn't even known was available. My daughter drew me a picture that week. Crayon figures around a dinner table, mom and dad at dinner, happy again. 3 figures. Not 8 or 10 or however many empty chairs I'd been setting for people who never showed up. Just 3. Just us. Just the people who actually wanted to be there. I started painting our dining room a lighter color. Something brighter, warmer. As I rolled that paint over the walls, I felt like I was painting over years of resentment, years of feeling unworthy, years of believing that love meant saying yes to everything even when it was killing me. I deleted myself from the family group chat. Removed my number from the family phone tree for birthday reminders and holiday planning. Changed my banking information so those automatic family fund transfers couldn't happen anymore even if I had a moment of weakness. And I started a new budget category, daughter's future. Every dollar I stopped giving away to people who took it for granted went into that fund. 100 here, 50 there. Within a month, I had saved more money than I had in the previous year. Every dollar I stopped giving away, I gave to my peace. Months passed. The angry texts stopped coming. The guilt trips ended. The emergency calls for money went silent. And you know what? Nobody died. Nobody lost their homes. Nobody ended up on the street. Somehow, mysteriously, they all figured out how to fund their own lives when their personal ATM machine stopped dispensing cash. My wedding anniversary came around again. This time, I set the table for 3. Used the good china anyway, because why should I save it for people who don't show up? My daughter helped light the candles, the same ones from last year, because I'd saved them, blown them out before they could burn down to nothing in an empty room. My husband looked around our smaller, simpler, brighter table and smiled. Feels different this year. Because it's ours, I said, and I meant it. Every part of it. The food I cooked because I wanted to, not because I was trying to prove something. The wine we chose because we liked it, not because we were trying to impress people who wouldn't appreciate it anyway. The conversation we had because we enjoyed each other's company, not because we were filling awkward silence left by people who should have been there but weren't. I looked at our family photo on the wall, me, my husband, our daughter, and Mrs. Henderson, who had become more family to us in 6 months than my blood relatives had been in 6 years. Under it, my daughter had written in her careful handwriting, "Real family shows up." Real family shows up. Not just when they need something. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when there's something in it for them. They show up when you need them to celebrate, when you need them to cry, when you need them to just exist in the same space and share the same air and prove that you matter to someone in this world. Sometimes losing people is how you finally find peace. I used to think family was about blood, about obligation, about owing people things just because you shared DNA or a last name or childhood memories. I thought love meant sacrifice, even when the sacrifice was everything and the love was nothing. But real family, the kind that matters, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds you up instead of bleeding you dry, that's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about caring enough to be present for the small moments and the big ones. It's about giving because you want to, not because you're expected to. My phone doesn't buzz with demands anymore. My bank account doesn't drain itself into other people's dreams. My dinner table doesn't have empty chairs that remind me of all the ways I'm not enough for the people who are supposed to love me most. Instead, I have peace. I have a husband who sees my worth. I have a daughter who knows what real love looks like because she's watching me choose myself, choose our family, choose the people who choose us back. I have neighbors who bring soup without strings. I have coworkers who offer opportunities without expectations. I have a life that belongs to me again. And yes, sometimes I miss them. Sometimes I scroll through social media and see photos of family gatherings I'm not invited to anymore, family trips I'm not funding anymore, family jokes I'm not included in anymore. Sometimes the little girl inside me who just wanted to belong, who just wanted to be enough, who just wanted to matter, sometimes she cries a little. But then I remember the empty chairs. I remember the cold food. I remember the group chat photos of them laughing without me. I remember the $2,000 demand that came without a 2-minute apology. I remember how small I felt, how used I felt, how completely taken for granted I was. And I remember that losing people who only loved my wallet was how I finally found people who love my heart. The real tragedy isn't that they're gone. The real tragedy is how long I let them stay. How many years I wasted trying to buy love from people who were never selling it. How much of myself I gave away to people who never even said thank you. But that tragedy has an expiration date, and mine expired the night I sent $2 instead of $2,000. The night I chose my peace over their guilt. The night I finally learned that, no, is a complete sentence, and family is not a reason to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I am enough. My love is enough. My presence is enough. And anyone who doesn't see that, anyone who only sees me as a source of funding for their happiness, they don't deserve a seat at my table, empty or otherwise. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop loving people who don't love you back. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop giving to people who only take. Sometimes the most family-oriented thing you can do is build a new family with people who understand what family actually means. I spent 3 days planning that anniversary dinner for people who couldn't spare 3 minutes to tell me they weren't coming. I'll never make that mistake again. The only plans I make now are for people who show up. The only tables I set are for people who want to be there. The only love I give is to people who give it back. And you know what? That's enough. More than enough. It's everything.